She had spent years saving lives, guiding patients back from the edge of death. But one night, everything changed. Maya Collins, a dedicated head nurse, pulled an injured stranger from the brink, only to find herself thrown into a nightmare she never saw coming. Within days, her career was destroyed, her name dragged through the mud, and the very system she served turned against her. But the man she saved wasn't just anyone, and what happened next shook an entire city. How does a single act of kindness lead to the sound of helicopters over your home? Maya Collins had built her life around care, precision, and compassion. As the head nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital, her days were long, her nights often sleepless, but she wore her dedication like a badge of honor. Patients trusted her, families relied on her, and colleagues, at least most of them, respected her skill. Outside the hospital, her world was simple. A modest apartment, a few close friends, and the quiet pride of knowing she was making a difference. But beneath the polished hallways of St. Vincent's, an unspoken tension simmered. Maya had learned to navigate the sideways glances, the clipped tones, the promotions that never came. It was the kind of racism that hid behind smiles and policies, always just enough to remind her she didn't quite belong in their world. Still, she kept her focus on the patients, telling herself that the work mattered more than the politics. She had no idea that one late-night shift would put her face to face with a man whose presence would upend everything, and expose the ugliest side of the institution she had given her life to. It happened on a rainy Thursday night. The emergency room was chaos, sirens screaming outside, nurses rushing in every direction. Maya was halfway through checking a patient's chart when a paramedic burst through the doors, soaked to the bone, wheeling in a man covered in blood. His clothes were expensive but torn, his face pale from shock. No ID, no name, just a broken body barely holding on. Without hesitation, Maya took charge. Her voice was steady, her movements precise. She issued orders, stabilized his breathing, and stopped the bleeding before the doctors even realized what was happening. Hours later, when the man was finally safe in recovery, she allowed herself a single deep breath. She didn't know his name. She didn't care. Saving lives was simply her job. But the next morning, the whispers began. The hospital's director, Richard Hale, summoned her to his office. His words were sharp, each syllable dripping with false civility. He accused her of bypassing protocol, of using unauthorized procedures, of jeopardizing hospital liability. In truth, she had done everything right. But Hale's eyes told a different story. This wasn't about policy. It was about her. By noon, rumors had spread through the hospital like wildfire. Colleagues who once nodded at her in the hallways now avoided her gaze. A formal notice appeared on her locker. Effective immediately, her employment was terminated. No hearing, no defense, just gone. Maya stood outside the hospital in the rain, her scrubs clinging to her skin, her hands trembling. She had just saved a man's life, yet she was being punished as if she had committed a crime. The injustice burned, but the humiliation cut deeper. She knew this was bigger than one bad decision by a superior. This was the culmination of years of quiet discrimination finally breaking the surface. That night, she lay awake replaying every moment, every patient she had fought for, every sacrifice she had made. And still, she was discarded like she didn't matter. But she had no way of knowing that the man she'd saved was far more than a nameless patient, and that he had just discovered what happened to the nurse who kept him alive. 2 days later, the sound of distant rotors began to grow louder over her neighborhood. Windows rattled. Neighbors stepped outside to look. Maya stood frozen in her doorway as not one, but 2 helicopters descended toward her street. Her heart pounded. Who were they here for? And why was her name suddenly on everyone's lips? The first helicopter landed with a deafening roar, its wind whipping through Maya's hair as she shielded her eyes. The second circled above, a black and gold emblem glinting on its side. Neighbors whispered, craning their necks to see. Then the side door slid open, and a tall man stepped out, his face familiar from news articles and magazine covers. Alexander Grant, billionaire, CEO, the man whose life she had saved. He didn't wait for introductions. He strode past the cameras and microphones that seemed to materialize from nowhere and stopped in front of her, his expression unreadable. Behind him, men in dark suits carried boxes, evidence files stamped with the hospital's name. Within minutes, it became clear what was happening. Alexander had learned the truth. She had been fired for saving his life, targeted not for her actions, but for who she was, and he had decided to act. Police vehicles pulled up alongside the helicopters. Officers in tactical gear moved toward Richard Hale, who had been dragged to the scene under subpoena. His confident smirk cracked as Alexander handed over documents. Proof of fraud, discrimination, and years of corruption buried inside the hospital's walls. Hale's protests were drowned out by the click of handcuffs and the flash of cameras. Maya stood frozen, the chaos swirling around her. Just days earlier, she had been discarded, humiliated, left wondering how she would survive. Now, the same institution that tried to erase her name was being dismantled in front of the entire city. The crowd erupted, some in shock, others in cheers. But amid the noise, Maya felt something she hadn't in days. The sharp, almost unfamiliar rush of hope. And as Richard Hale was led away in chains, Alexander turned back to her with a single promise that would change her life forever. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from that day rippled far beyond the hospital walls. Richard Hale was indicted on multiple charges: fraud, discrimination, and abuse of power, ensuring his name would forever be associated with disgrace. St. Vincent's, stripped of its tainted leadership, was given a new name: the Maya Collins Health Center. Under Alexander Grant's backing, it became a place where care came before profit, and every patient, no matter their race or background, was treated with dignity. For Maya, the transformation was more than symbolic. She was offered the role of director, but more importantly, she was given a platform to speak. Her story spread across the nation. Morning shows, news headlines, social media feeds, all carrying her message: that racism in healthcare was real, dangerous, and needed to be dismantled. Communities rallied. Donations poured in. Other hospitals began adopting her model, cutting through bureaucratic red tape to focus on compassion and equity. For every policy that changed, Maya thought about the patients who would no longer face what she had endured. Yet, even in her moments of triumph, she knew her experience was not unique. She had the rare protection of the man she saved, but countless others still faced discrimination with no helicopters coming to their rescue. Her story was proof that change is possible, but also a reminder of how far we still have to go. Because the truth is, Maya's fight wasn't just for her job. It was for every nurse overlooked, every patient dismissed, every voice silenced by a system that pretends to care. So the question remains: how many more lives must be broken before justice is no longer the exception, but the rule? What do you think? Was this justice served, or just one rare victory in a much bigger fight? If Maya's story moved you, hit the like button so more people hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that need to be told.